Hello, a warm welcome to all the English literature enthusiasts. How have you been? I'm here with a new video and it is a requested video once again. And I'm going to discuss post-colonial theory in a simplified manner. Many times when we are going to read post-colonial theory for the first time, as a UG student or a PG student, we come across a lot of difficulties and hurdles. And when we are checking a lot of theoretical books on post-colonialism and the critical interventions, sometimes we get puzzled. So my intention in this video is to guide you through this myriad mysterious process of learning about post-colonialism. Okay, so let's begin this video. Now, before beginning the video, let me define what is post-colonialism or what do we mean by post-colonial studies. Post-colonial studies refer to an effort by the scholars in such diverse fields as literature, cultural studies, and anthropology to come to terms from the global perspective with the legacy of European colonialism. And how did it start? From the 15th century, with the spirit of exploration and discovering new places, a few European nations such as France, the Great Britain, Spain, and Dutch. So these are actually national identities. They captured almost 80% of the global space, and they exerted their power, their sovereignty over those nations. So, in political and socio-cultural ways, colonialism affected not only the nations or those places they have captured, but also colonialism also affects the European imperialism. And almost by the end of 20th century, most of the colonized nations had been able to liberate themselves, but the effect of colonialism still looms large. Now, in the critical understanding, whenever we are talking about post-colonialism, we want to investigate the critical ways how the colonized nations or the subjects who have been colonized, how they're reacting or how they're responding to the effects of European powers and their method of colonizing them. So, post colonialism, these days, often we are talking post colonialism in terms of decoloniality or decolonialism. It is essential to understand what is the basic difference between post colonialism and decolonialism. I'm giving you a very simplified understanding. Post colonialism refers to the investigation or the effects of the colonial power and how the colonized nation and the people they are reacting against it and how they're responding to it. So post-colonialism basically a method of investigation about the reactions or the method of coping up on the agenda of European colonialism by the colonized nations. And decolonialism means decolonialism wants to do away with the method, with the investigation related to colonialism, and they want to move away from the phase of being colonized. And decolonialism wants to debunk this kind of amnesia, this kind of hangover that there was a and there was a mega event of British colonialism, or there was the event of power capture. So decolonialism wants to move away from the if from the event of being captured by the other nations, and they want to assert their own independent identity. While post-colonialism wants to research, wants to investigate the effects of colonialism and how the colonized nation are coping up with it or responding to it. Clear? So, whenever we are talking about post-colonialism, from the definition, we have already understood the fact that post-colonialism means there is a binary opposition. There is a master, there is a slave. There is a white master or the white colonizer and the non-white colonized subjects. So post-colonialism theory operates on this binary opposition. And now there are a lot of features common to post-colonial literature. For instance, post-colonialism believes that uh, mm, it is important, it is essential on part of the colonized subjects to revive their lost past or history. And also, post-colonialism is all about reclaiming identities on part of the colonized subjects. And post-colonialism also talks about the methods or the mediate processes by which the colonized subjects would be able to reclaim their identity, their past, and their history. Because when the colonial masters arrived at the nations they wanted to rule, they always created the myth that their history, the history of the land, the history, civilization of the colonized land always began with the arrival of the white masters. So there was no history, no past, no mythology before the arrival of the colonizer. And the history, their mythology, their tradition, everything successfully had been wiped out. So this is the colonial agenda. They wanted to wipe out everything from the colonized nation so that they can begin their venture of colonizing the nation very successfully. So the colonial master always wanted to project the pre-colonial state of the colonized nation as a limbo, as a void, as if nothing existed there before the arrival of the colonial masters. Now, it is the task of the colonized nations, it is the task of post-colonial subjects to regain, to revive, to trace their lost histories, lost tradition, which had been wiped out by the colonial masters. So, if you ask me to briefly mention major features of colonial post-colonial theory, I would mention that major feature of post-colonial theory is number one, post-colonialism wants to revive the lost past, lost history of the colonized nation. And second agenda of the post-colonial theory is to trace the methods, the methods or the various mysterious investigative processes by which a colonized subject wants to reclaim their identity because their identities have been uh, taken away from them by the colonial masters. And another important feature of post-colonial theory is language, because when the white colonizers colonized a nation, the colonial masters also robbed the nation of its language. So reclaiming back their language is also associated with reclaiming their identity once again. And very importantly, post-colonial writers believe that their identity is very unstable, it is very hybrid, it is very dubious. And post-coloniality and race both are sites of contestation and debate rather than clearly defined and easily summarized fields. So as a result, post-colonial theory as a critical interpretation wants to reclaim the past of the colonized nation, wants to rebuild the identity of the colonized subject, wants to recreate, wants to reclaim the language of the colonized nation. These are the three major features, simply speaking, but there are other nuanced aspects also. I will be referring to all these aspects minutely in this talk. See, whenever we are talking about post-colonial theory, we read theories of very important theoreticians like French Fanon, Homi K. Bhabha, Salman Rushdie, Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, and and Edward Said. So these are the great masters, these are the great theoreticians on post-colonialism, and without mentioning their theories, you will not be able to understand post-colonial theory. So for the understanding, I think first of all, I would mention French Fanon. Fanon was a psychiatrist in Martinique in Africa, and he wrote The Wretched of the Earth in 1961. Being a psychiatrist, his venture was to trace the psychological effect of colonization on the post-colonial subjects. So, in The Richard of the Earth, he talks about the psychological method of white man's power structure and how the nation had been colonized. And now, the Richard of the Earth talks about two major issues. One is it is important to reclaim their past, because it is important to reclaim the past because with the past their identity is also intricately related. And Fanon also talks about the necessity to find voice on part of the post-colonial subjects, because with the voice, with their own voice, they will only be able to create their past, their lost past, because the white master, the colonial master, has successfully wiped out the past and the language. So both are intricately connected. So from the very beginning, post-colonial theory emphasizes on the necessity to find out own voice of the colonized subjects and also their language, so that they will be able to recreate their past, they will be able to revive their past from the deadly clutches of the white colonizer. Next important theorist is Edward Said. Edward Said is very important for his critical work Orientalism, which was published in 1978. In his celebrated work Orientalism, he posits the idea of the Orient. What does he mean by the Orient? See, the whatever is happening in the West, in the western part of the world, that is heavily celebrated because that is the center of power, logic, reason, justice, civilization, everything. And whatever is non-West, whatever countries are located in the non-Western locations, they are systematically, politically, and geographically colonized. And the West believes that all the positive aspects of civilization are there in the West, and all the negative aspects of civilization are there in the non-Western locations. And as a result, they have termed these non-Western locations as the Orient. Here, by the term Orient, they always attach some exotic, mystic elements, sensuality, torpor, all these negative aspects with the non-European places, non-Western places. And as a result, the Orient, or the idea of Orientalism as a result, comes to define the non-Western populations and their behavior, their life, their civilization in terms of a negative light. And as a result, the Orient stands as the other of the West. So whatever is good that is located in the West, whatever is bad that is located in the Orient or the non-Western locations. So this kind of idea of Orientalism has been based on a binary opposition, where the West is the representation of civilization, order, decorum, decency, beauty, everything, and all the negativities are associated with the term Orient. And Orient is also heavily attached with the concepts of exoticism, mystery, black magic, power, sexuality, torpor. So this kind of negative powers, evil spirits are there in the Orient, and it is a very powerful political construct, so that the non-European locations, non-Western locations can easily be captured with the civilizing mission of the West. Now, Science Orientalism talks about the concept of otherness as a source for threat for the colonial masters, because otherness is not celebrated in the colonial theory. The colonial masters are afraid of otherness, and so they systematically called this other location as the Orient. Now, next is important theorist is Homi K. Bhabha. Homi Bhabha is famous for his three notions related to post-coloniality. Homi Bhabha talks about hybridity, he talks about mimicry, and he talks about ambivalence. So these three theories. Bhabha's theory of hybridity is very important. Why? Because Bhabha talks about hybridity as an essential feature of post-colonial identity. He talks about hybridity because it is a pluricultural and cross-cultural fertilization that makes a post-colonial subject's identity a hybrid one. Therefore, there is a potential for change, there is a potential for otherness, and this hybrid identity of the post-colonial subject is a product of close socio-cultural interconnectedness with the colonial master. So the identity of the post-colonial subject is very hybrid, it is unstable, and it is also a result of a cross-fertilization, cultural cross-fertilization with the white master. Now, whenever Bhabha talks about hybridity, he also focuses on the notion of authenticity and purity, racial purity. These two colonial concepts are at risk when he is posing the identity as a hybrid factor. Understand? Next is mimicry. Bhabha talks about mimicry because the colonized subjects imitate or mimic the master, and as a result, um, by imitating the master, they want to remain very close to the master, and yet their mimicry makes them distinct from the master. So, the act of mimicry has transformed them into a reformed other, and this reformed other is a potent source for danger for the colonial master. Why? Because see, I'm giving you an example. When British people came in India and they taught the Indians to speak, to learn to write English, and to behave like the sahibs, what happened? British people, they had been able to create a babu class who imitated, who mimicked the behavior, language, dress code of the master, but yet they are not master. Their brown skin makes a difference. So they are the mimic man. They are mimicking the master, but they are not master. They talk, they behave, they dress dress up like the master, but they are not master. So mimic or the act of mimicry is a very potential threat for colonial master. It has two perspectives. Mimicry, on the one hand, gives the colonial master a sense of complacency that the master has been able to create successful slaves who can imitate, who can mimic them, who can follow them blindly. But on the other hand, the act of mimicking the master turns out to be a method of resistance, because through the act of mimicry, the post-colonial subject retains its subjectivity, its distinctiveness. And as a result, mimicry turns out to be a dual-edged weapon on the hands of the post-colonial subjects. So it is such a wonderful concept, and I always appreciate Bhabha's concept of mimicry. And the third concept that Bhabha talks about, this is ambivalence. What does he mean by ambivalence? Ambivalence is when post-colonial subject always believes that his relation with the colonial master is an ambivalent one, because what the colonial master wants to do with him or with his nation, the post-colonial subject is unable to understand. So he is very much puzzled, he is very much confused. So this kind of attitude on part of the colonial master is termed as ambivalence. I'm giving you an example so that you can understand this concept very easily. See, when the colonial master entered the land the land which he wants to colonize, he poses the mask of a gentle colonizer. He gives the message that he is taking up the white man's burden to civilize this nation, because the nation is not civilized. So he is working for the welfare of the people in the colonized nation. But whenever he has been able to colonize the nation, he actually brutally tormenting the colonized people. He is robbing them of their language, of their identity, of their tradition, of their culture. So he is systematically plundering the nation. So this kind of attitude is very ambivalent. First, he poses the mask of a well-wisher. Now he is posing the mask of a brutal, cruel master who wants to plunder the land ruthlessly for his own benefit, for his own colonial agenda. So this is ambivalence. The next theories I'll be discussing is Gayatri Spivak. Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak is famous for her essay Can the Subaltern Speak? And her theory of subaltern subject is very important in the context of post-colonial theory. Spivak speaks about the people, the group of people who remains at the lower part of the hierarchy in the colonized nation. And now these people, they don't have any voice. They're voiceless. Their voices are systematically silenced from the grand narrative of civilization and history. So what will happen to those people? Those voiceless people, she called them subaltern group of people. And she talks about the necessity to find another academic framework, because our accepted academic framework, our language will not be able to define, will not be able to point out their voices, their problems, their predicament. So it is important to create a subaltern language with which they will be able to assert their identity, they will be able to articulate their problem. So subaltern theory of subalternism is formulated taking cues from Marxist theories, from feminist theory, and also from um, structuralist theory also, I believe. Next important concept is it is given by Griffith, Tiffin, and Ashcroft in their book The Empire Writes Back. It is a major theoretical work on post-colonial understanding, and in this book they are talking about three major themes: abrogation and appropriation. Here, the colonized subjects, they abrogate means they reject the authority of language of the colonial master, and they use the same language to articulate their own causes. For instance, when Chinua Achebe, he wrote Things Fall Apart in English, but he is using the language of the master as his tool, as his weapon, with which he will be able to describe, he will be able to represent the predicament of the colonized subjects in Africa. So, abrogation and appropriation. The second theory that this book, The Emperor Writes Back, talks about is the necessity to reformulate literary canons. Because in typical English literature, the literary canon that we come across, it is always been on Eurocentric perspective. Eurocentric, Western-centric hegemony is there, and as a result, the Western literary canon has been formed. Now, in their book, Griffith, Ashcroft, and Tiffin, they are talking about the necessity to recreate, to deconstruct the established literary canon in English literature and recreate the canon from the pluricultural, multicultural perspectives, talking about the necessity to pluralize the discourse of literary canon, because a lot of non-Western authors, non-Western writers will be able to make their own space in this literary canon. So they talk about the necessity to deconstruct the established English literary canon. And the third concept they are talking about is cultural interplay and hybridity. These are the two methods by which one can be able to celebrate post-colonial identity. Now, I'm going to discuss the important theorist and writer Salman Rushdie. Rushdie, as a post-colonial writer, Rushdie gives us three important ideas. Rushdie continuously working on the concept of hybrid identity and also the narrative storytelling and his concept of magic realism. I have discussed hybridity as one of the major features of post-colonial existence, so I'm not going to talk about hybridity now, but I'm going to focus on two major concepts proposed by Salman Rushdie. One is the concept of narrative storytelling. Because Rushdie talks about the post-colonial countries, post-colonial situation where the colonized subjects are suffering from these negative emotions such as boredom, ennui, and monotony. So in the colony, life is very uneventful. Life is very banal. Life is very life lacks all the interesting features. Therefore, the colonized subjects always suffer from these negative emotions like ennui, boredom, frustration, depression. And as a result, in order to deal with the overwhelming monotony of the colonized nation, it is essential on part of the colonized subjects to tell stories, to create stories. It is only the story that comes up as an effective medium of survival. And as a result, Salman Rushdie continuously talking about non-linear stories, non-linear narratives that again and again is narrated by the post-colonial subjects, because these non-linear stories turn out to be their method of survival amidst the banality of the empire. And the next important concept introduced by Rushdie is, I have already mentioned, magic realism. What is magic realism? In the Latin American writing also you will find a lot of references to magic realism. Here, I want to give you a very simple definition of magic realism. Magic realism means the reality mm, in the white master's land is very different from the reality that is prevailing in the colonized nations. And as a result, in order to represent, in order to depict the authentic picture of reality in the colonized nations, the writers need the intervention of magic realism. Magic realism means the reality in the colonized nations is so different that the intervention of magic is necessary. Intervention of magic is required in order to depict, in order to represent this kind of predicament of the colonized subjects. So two important concepts are narrated by Salman Rushdie. And also, I think in the post-colonial context, important is language. Important is the theory of diaspora also. Theory of diaspora means the group of people who willingly or unwillingly leave their homeland and they move to a different country which has turned out to be their host land. Now in their host land, they are continuously facing lot of difficulties. They are facing identity problem, they are facing cultural differences, they are facing language differences, and as a result they are again being colonized by the host land. And now, if we are talking about the diasporic experience is a mixed one. Sometimes it is willingly people leave their homeland and they migrate to hostland. Sometimes people under compulsion had to leave their homeland and need to move to their hostland. So in both the cases, the new location, the host land, always exerts its powerful influence on the people, on the diasporic subject, and as a result, diasporic subjects are craving for their homeland. The nostalgia is an overwhelming feeling for a diasporic subject, and the homing desire. They are unable to return to home, but they are creating situations such as a particular food they liked at their homeland, but this food is not available in their host land. Now in their homely setup, they're making that food in order to revive homely memories. So this is basically all about diasporic theory. And the concept of pain is associated with the diasporic consciousness, but sometimes there is painless diasporic experience also. If the immigration happened willingly, happily, then there is no pain. So diaspora or the theory of diaspora is one of the important concepts related to post-colonialism. And I think language is also a major concern for post-colonial theorists, because post-colonial theory wants to respond to the effects of colonization, and as a result language is the medium of weapon with which only a colonized subject will be able to assert his or her identity, past and language. So language has always remained a major area of discussion in the post-colonial theory. So language can be a method of reclaiming one's past. Language can be a method of creating a new identity. Language can be a new weapon with which one will be able to recreate a new future for their own land. So this is my understanding in a nutshell about post-colonial theory. If you have any observation, any comment, please do let me know. And if you have any topic in your mind, you can let me know in the comment section, so that I'll make a new video on the requested topic. Hope you will find this video helpful. If you like this video, do like, share and subscribe my channel, and stay tuned. Bye. Good night.